I'm a 32-year-old guy with a brother, Austin, who's 29. Growing up, Austin and I were never particularly close. He's always been the impulsive, reckless type, while I leaned more toward being cautious and goal-oriented. It's not that we didn't get along, but there was always an undercurrent of competition between us, mostly on his part. Over the years, that competition has turned into something a lot more toxic. Recently, I landed a promotion at work. It's a big deal for me, not just because of the title or the raise, which, let's be honest, was significant, but because it took years of hard work and late nights to get here. For the first time, I'm in a comfortable financial position where I don't have to stress about bills, and I've even started putting money away for a future home. Austin, on the other hand, hasn't been so lucky, or, depending on how you look at it, hasn't made the best choices. Austin lost his job a few months ago, something about consistently missing deadlines and not being a team player. Since then, he's been struggling to make ends meet. He's racked up credit card debt, missed a few rent payments, and is behind on his car loan. None of this surprised me, though. Austin has always been the kind of guy who spends money he doesn't have on things he doesn't need, whether it's the latest gadgets, expensive nights out, or random impulse purchases. A couple of weeks ago, Austin reached out to me. He didn't beat around the bush. He needed money, enough to cover his overdue rent and car payments. He called it a loan, but history told me otherwise. This wouldn't be the first time Austin asked for financial help, and not once has he ever paid me back. I hesitated. I wanted to help, but the thought of throwing money into what felt like a bottomless pit didn't sit right with me. My hesitation didn't go unnoticed. Austin went from pleading to angry in record time. He accused me of being selfish, of flaunting my success while he struggled. He brought up the fact that I'm in a good place financially now, so it's not like it would hurt me to help him out. I didn't know what to say. On one hand, he's my brother. On the other, I've been burned by him too many times to count. It's not just about the money. 2 years ago, Austin pulled what I can only describe as one of the most petty stunts I've ever seen. I had a crucial business meeting, a chance to pitch an idea that could have fast-tracked my career. Austin knew how important it was to me. The night before the meeting, he offered to help me review my presentation materials. I thought it was a rare moment of support from him, but I should have known better. While I was setting up the next morning, Austin came into the room with a coffee cup in hand. He accidentally spilled it all over my printed materials. At first, he acted apologetic, but later he laughed it off, calling it no big deal. I had to scramble to reprint everything and ended up being late to the meeting. I still managed to salvage the pitch, but it was a stressful, unnecessary hurdle, one Austin never apologized for. Our parents, of course, brushed the whole thing off. They've always excused Austin's behavior, labeling it as harmless pranks or saying that's just how Austin is. Meanwhile, I was always expected to be the bigger person, the responsible one, the one who forgave and moved on. It's a dynamic that's worn me down over the years. When I didn't immediately agree to Austin's latest request for money, the family dynamics kicked into full gear. Austin stormed off, but not before calling me selfish to my face. Later, my parents called, asking why I was being so hard on him. Family helps family, they said, as if I hadn't already done enough. I tried explaining my side, but it felt like talking to a brick wall. Then came the real kicker. A mutual acquaintance casually mentioned something Austin had said about me a while back. Apparently, during a rough patch at work a couple of years ago, Austin had been spreading false rumors about me. Nothing huge, just little digs meant to undermine my reputation. It didn't cost me my job, but it came close. When I confronted Austin about it, he brushed it off, saying I was being paranoid. At this point, I've had enough. I told Austin I wasn't giving him the money. Predictably, he didn't take it well. He's now messaging mutual friends and family members, painting me as the villain. One relative even forwarded me a screenshot of something Austin posted online, calling me a greedy sociopath who abandoned his family. I don't know what the next steps are. Part of me feels guilty, but another part knows this cycle has to stop. I decided to post my story here, hoping for some clarity. Am I in the wrong for drawing a line? Or is it time to accept that sometimes family can be the most toxic part of your life? Update 1. After refusing to lend Austin the money, things escalated faster than I could have anticipated. Austin didn't just sulk or go silent, he went all out, turning his frustration into a full-blown campaign against me. The first sign of trouble came when I saw his posts on social media. At first, they were vague, stuff like some people think money makes them better than others. Sad. But as the days went on, the posts got more pointed, with phrases like, imagine abandoning your own family in their time of need, and success really changes people. Guess you don't need loyalty when you've got a fat paycheck. He never mentioned me by name, but it was obvious who he was talking about. Meanwhile, my parents were ramping up the pressure from their end. They called me multiple times, asking me to reconsider and warning me that my decision was tearing the family apart. I tried to explain my side again, how Austin has never repaid a loan, how I've been burned too many times, but it didn't matter. They wouldn't hear it. My dad even threw in the classic guilt trip. What if the roles were reversed? Wouldn't you want Austin to help you? It was exhausting. In the middle of all this, I started getting messages from friends who'd seen Austin's posts. Some were just checking in, but others were outright furious on my behalf. One friend, who's known Austin almost as long as I have, called him a walking disaster and told me not to give in. Another friend shared a story about Austin trying to borrow money from them a couple of years ago, using the same dire situation excuse. It felt good to know people could see through him, but it didn't make the situation any less draining. Then, out of nowhere, a cousin reached out. We aren't super close, so I was surprised when they messaged me. They admitted they'd been in a similar position with Austin before. He'd borrowed money from them, promised to pay it back, and then ghosted them for months. When they finally brought it up, Austin had accused them of being stingy and obsessed with money. The cousin told me to stand my ground, saying Austin would only keep taking advantage if I caved. Things took an even more ridiculous turn when a mutual acquaintance spilled the beans on what Austin was really planning to do with the money. Apparently, Austin wasn't as dire as he made himself out to be. The money wasn't for rent or car payments, it was for a vacation he was planning with his girlfriend. When I heard that, I felt a mix of anger and relief. anger at how easily Austin lied to me, but relief that I hadn't given in. That same week, I remembered another incident Austin pulled at work. A couple of years ago, he offered to help me with a big project. Instead, he emailed my boss the wrong version of the documents I'd asked him to send, which almost derailed the entire thing. At the time, he laughed it off as a mistake, but now I wasn't so sure. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how often Austin's accidents seemed to target me. Things came to a head when my parents decided to organize a family meeting. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I figured it was my chance to lay everything out on the table. When we all sat down, it was clear my parents had already taken Austin's side. They started with the usual, how families should support each other, how Austin just needs a little help to get back on his feet. Austin sat there, arms crossed, looking smug. That's when I pulled out my evidence. I'd printed screenshots of Austin's social media posts, the messages from my cousin, and the vacation plans Austin had conveniently forgotten to mention. I even brought up the workplace sabotage and his history of unpaid loans. For a moment, the room was silent. Then my dad said it was all irrelevant because Austin's still family, and family comes first. My mom chimed in saying I was being too cold-hearted. Austin, of course, played the victim. He claimed I was digging up old stuff to make him look bad and accused me of holding a grudge. When I didn't back down, he snapped. He shouted that I'd always hated him, that I was jealous of him, and that I just wanted to see him fail. Then he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. After the meeting, I started reflecting on our dynamic. Had I been enabling Austin by forgiving him so many times? Was I partly to blame for letting things get this far? I remembered another incident from years ago, when Austin invited a bunch of uninvited guests to my high school graduation party. It turned into a chaotic mess, and I spent the whole night cleaning up after everyone. To stop this cycle, I started researching how to set clear financial boundaries with family. My partner has been incredibly supportive through all of this, helping me draft a firm but polite message to the family group chat. In it, I explained my position and made it clear that my decision wasn't changing. I also decided to update Reddit. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive, with people sharing their own stories of dealing with toxic siblings. They called out Austin's behavior for what it was, manipulative and entitled. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't crazy for standing my ground. Update 2. After the family meeting debacle, I thought things might settle down, but Austin proved me wrong in a spectacular way. Within days, he ramped up his campaign of painting me as the villain. This time, he added a dramatic flair. He posted a series of photos on social media that made it look like he was homeless. He'd positioned himself in front of a dilapidated building, wearing ragged clothes, with captions like, "Sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who let you fall the hardest, and family means nothing when money's involved." He even tagged me in one of the posts, making it impossible to ignore. The comments section exploded. Some people asked if he was okay, offering sympathy and support, while others directly called me out, saying things like, "How could you let your own brother end up like this?" A few friends messaged me privately, genuinely confused, and asking if Austin was really homeless. One of them even offered to help Austin financially, assuming I had turned my back on him. Then came the twist. Austin's girlfriend, someone I've barely interacted with, messaged me out of the blue. Her tone was friendly but probing. She asked why I wouldn't help Austin and casually mentioned how he's always said I've resented him for being the fun one growing up. It was such an odd thing to hear, considering Austin's consistent pattern of sabotaging me over the years. I didn't respond to her message, but her reaching out was another sign that Austin was pulling out all the stops. Meanwhile, the family drama escalated. Some relatives, the ones I barely see, decided it was their time to weigh in. They started sending me guilt-laden messages, accusing me of being cold and unforgiving. Others, however, surprised me by showing their support. My uncle called to say he'd seen Austin's antics before and knew exactly what I was dealing with. He told me to keep my head up and not let Austin manipulate me into caving. It felt good to know not everyone was buying into Austin's narrative. Around this time, another bombshell dropped. A former coworker reached out saying they remembered Austin from a few years ago. Apparently, Austin had stolen my client contact list from my laptop when he visited my apartment once. He'd sold the list to a competitor for a quick payday. At the time, I hadn't connected the dots about how a competitor suddenly gained access to my leads, but now it made perfect sense. I debated taking legal action but ultimately decided against it. It wasn't worth dragging this mess into court, though it added another layer to Austin's betrayal. My parents weren't done either. They called me again, saying my refusal to help was putting a strain on the family. This time, they took it a step further, threatening to cut me out of family gatherings unless I helped Austin. They framed it as a choice, support Austin or be ostracized. I told them they could do what they felt was best for them, but I wasn't changing my stance. That conversation didn't end well. Feeling overwhelmed, I started looking for ways to cope with the constant stress. I joined a local support group for people dealing with toxic family members. Hearing other people's stories helped me realize I wasn't alone, and it gave me the tools to start setting firmer boundaries. It wasn't easy, but it was a step in the right direction. Austin's situation, meanwhile, continued to spiral. His landlord finally evicted him for non-payment, and from what I heard, he had to move back in with our parents. They weren't thrilled about it, but they still refused to hold him accountable. Not long after, his girlfriend dumped him. She'd apparently grown tired of his constant financial instability and toxic behavior. She even made a cryptic post on her own social media about how some people refuse to take responsibility for their own mess. Then came the inevitable, Austin's apology attempt. He messaged me saying he was sorry if he'd upset me, but insisting that I'd misunderstood his intentions. He claimed he never meant for things to get so messy and just wanted a little help. It was obvious he didn't mean it. There was no acknowledgement of his lies or the damage he'd caused. I didn't reply. At this point, I decided to go low contact with Austin and set boundaries with the rest of the family. I blocked him on social media and made it clear to my parents that I wouldn't engage in any more discussions about helping him. If they wanted to support him, that was their choice, but I was done. I updated Reddit again, sharing how everything had unfolded. The response was overwhelming. People dissected Austin's manipulative tactics, pointing out patterns I hadn't even noticed before. Others shared their own stories of dealing with toxic siblings, which made me feel less alone. Interestingly, the tide within the family started to turn. More relatives began siding with me as Austin's lies unraveled. The screenshot of his supposed homeless photos made the rounds, and it became clear to everyone that Austin was exaggerating for sympathy. A few even reached out to apologize for doubting me. As for me, I started focusing on moving forward. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe without the weight of Austin's drama hanging over me. It wasn't an easy journey, but it was worth it. Update 3. After everything that had already happened, I thought Austin might dial things down, but instead, he doubled down on his theatrics. He kept up his social media posts, leaning heavily into the abandoned by family narrative. In one particularly dramatic update, he shared a black and white photo of himself sitting on the sidewalk, looking disheveled, with the caption, "When family turns their back, you find out who really cares." At first, people in the comments continued offering sympathy, but things took a turn when one mutual friend asked a simple question: "If you're struggling so much, why were you at that concert last weekend?" That one comment opened the floodgates. People started questioning his story, asking how he could afford tickets, drinks, and new outfits if he was supposedly broke. Austin tried to deflect, but it was clear the cracks were starting to show. Then, out of nowhere, his ex-girlfriend stepped in. She posted her own story, addressing the situation directly. She revealed that Austin's financial problems weren't because of some unfortunate circumstances, but because of his reckless spending. According to her, Austin spent money like it grew on trees, designer clothes, nights out, and even a spur-of-the-moment trip to Vegas that she had warned him against. She also shared how she'd tried to help him budget, but he refused to listen and kept blaming others for his problems. Her post went viral within our circle, and suddenly, Austin's poor me act wasn't holding up anymore. That post caused a ripple effect. A few extended family members who had initially taken Austin's side started reaching out to me. Some apologized for pressuring me, saying they hadn't realized how bad things really were. Others just quietly distanced themselves from him, likely embarrassed for defending him in the first place. Amid this, one of my cousins reached out with another shocking revelation. Apparently, Austin had once tried to steal from their small business. He'd offered to help with some admin work during a busy season, but ended up trying to siphon money out of their accounts. They caught him before he could do any real damage, but it made them wary of him ever since. Hearing that was like another puzzle piece falling into place. It wasn't just me Austin had targeted, this was a pattern. Things continued to spiral for Austin. His landlord officially evicted him, and he moved back in with our parents. From what I heard, they weren't thrilled about it. While they were still defending him to me, I could tell they were starting to feel the strain. Austin wasn't contributing to the household, and he'd already started asking them for money to cover his car payments. Not long after Austin moved back home, my parents hit me with another ultimatum. They called, saying I needed to step up and help Austin find a job. They argued that my refusal to help was making things harder for everyone. I told them plainly that I wasn't responsible for Austin's choices, and that I wouldn't be dragged into cleaning up his mess anymore. This led to a heated argument, where they accused me of being heartless. I stood firm. Around the same time, the family group chat exploded. Austin posted a tearful message, saying how much he'd been struggling and blaming me for everything: his eviction, his breakup, even his inability to catch a break. I'd had enough. I posted one short reply: "I'm not responsible for Austin's life." Then, I left the group chat. Based on suggestions from Reddit, I decided to start therapy to process the years of guilt and manipulation I'd been carrying. During one session, I remembered another incident from childhood that I hadn't thought about in years. It was the science fair in 8th grade. I'd worked for weeks on my project, only for Austin to sneak into my room the night before and mess with it. He claimed it was a joke, but I ended up having to present a ruined project. It was another reminder of how long this pattern of jealousy and sabotage had been going on. Despite claiming he was job hunting, Austin's social media told a different story. He posted pictures of himself at bars, concerts, and even a weekend getaway with some friends. I saved the posts, just in case anyone tried to argue that he was making an effort. Weeks later, my mom called me unexpectedly. She started by apologizing for how things had gone during the family meeting and admitted she and my dad had been enabling Austin for years. She revealed they'd loaned him thousands of dollars over time, none of which he'd repaid. Hearing that was a turning point for me. It reinforced that I wasn't the only one Austin had taken advantage of, and it helped me let go of the guilt I'd been carrying about not helping him. Austin, meanwhile, continued to spiral. His attempts to guilt others weren't working as well anymore, and people were starting to see through his victim act. He lashed out at anyone who called him out, burning bridges left and right. It was clear he was running out of people to blame. Update 4. After weeks of nonstop drama, I finally decided I couldn't keep living in the chaos Austin created. The therapy sessions I'd started were helping me see just how much his toxicity had impacted my life over the years. My therapist helped me understand that setting boundaries wasn't just about protecting myself, it was also about refusing to enable Austin's behavior anymore. So I made the decision to go completely no contact NC with him and low contact with my parents. It wasn't easy, but it felt necessary. When I blocked Austin on all platforms, he didn't take it well. Within hours, mutual friends started reaching out, saying he was posting furious rants on social media. In one post, he claimed I'd abandoned the family and accused me of trying to erase him from my life. He even tried using mutual friends to guilt me into unblocking him, framing it as a chance to fix things. I stood my ground. During this time, my support network grew stronger. A few cousins who'd seen through Austin's antics from the start reached out more often, offering to help if I needed anything. I also reconnected with some old friends who, like me, had dealt with manipulative family members. Talking to people who genuinely cared made a huge difference. As I focused on maintaining my financial stability, I started reflecting on everything I'd worked for. Austin's requests for money hadn't just been frustrating, they had been outright dangerous to my goals. I realized that if I'd given in, it could have jeopardized my plans to buy a home or save for the future. That clarity reinforced my decision to cut him off. Of course, the surprises with Austin didn't stop there. One day, a family member contacted me privately and revealed something shocking. Austin had once tried to forge my signature on a loan application. It didn't go through because the bank flagged it for suspicious activity, but just knowing he'd attempted it was infuriating. It also made me wonder how far he'd been willing to go to get what he wanted. Not long after, I found out Austin had tried to sabotage me at work. Again. Apparently, during a rough patch a couple of years ago, he'd called my office pretending to be a dissatisfied client. He'd complained about my unprofessionalism, hoping it would cause problems for me. My boss eventually figured out the call was fake, but at the time, I hadn't known it was Austin behind it. Learning this was like another piece of the puzzle falling into place. To protect myself, I decided to consult a lawyer. While I didn't want to escalate things legally, I wanted to be prepared in case Austin tried anything else. The lawyer helped me draft a cease and desist letter, which I didn't end up using, but having it in my back pocket gave me peace of mind. Meanwhile, things were starting to fall apart for Austin at home. His behavior had finally pushed my parents to their breaking point. From what I heard, he was refusing to contribute to household expenses and constantly demanding money from them. This led to a massive argument one night, where my dad reportedly told him he needed to grow up and stop blaming everyone else for his problems. The turning point came at a family gathering. Austin showed up uninvited, trying to act like nothing was wrong. Things were fine until someone brought up his ex-girlfriend's viral post about his financial recklessness. Austin tried to brush it off as lies, but several people had already seen it and weren't buying his excuses. Someone even mentioned the social media post where he claimed to be homeless, asking why he'd been spotted at bars and concerts during that time. Embarrassed, Austin stormed out. For me, the decision to go NC brought a sense of relief I hadn't felt in years. Without Austin's constant drama, I could finally focus on myself and the people who truly mattered. I posted an update on Reddit, sharing everything that had happened. The comments section was overwhelmingly supportive, with people cheering on my growth and resilience. Some even shared their own stories of going NC with toxic family members, which reminded me I wasn't alone in this. A week later, Austin made one last attempt to get through to me. He sent a handwritten letter, which arrived in a crumpled envelope. In it, he begged for money, saying he had nowhere else to turn. True to form, he blamed everyone but himself for his situation, his ex, our parents, his friends, even me. He claimed that if I didn't help him, he'd be ruined forever. I didn't respond. I threw the letter away and decided that this was the final chapter of his influence on my life. Since then, I've maintained my no-contact boundary with Austin and have stayed firm in keeping things low contact with my parents. It hasn't been easy, but I finally feel like I'm living life on my own terms, free from the manipulation and guilt that used to hold me back. Update 5. It's been about a year since I decided to go no-contact NC with Austin, and life has taken a complete 180. The difference is night and day. For the first time in what feels like forever, there's peace, stability, and even moments of joy that aren't overshadowed by someone else's drama. Looking back, the decision to cut ties wasn't just necessary, it was life-changing. Therapy has been a huge part of my journey over the past year. Every session has peeled back layers of guilt and obligation that had been weighing me down for years. My therapist helped me see that my family's dynamics didn't define my worth, and that walking away from toxicity wasn't selfish, it was survival. One of the biggest milestones came when I stopped second-guessing myself. Austin's manipulation had me doubting everything, but I've finally learned to trust my instincts again. Meanwhile, my career has continued to thrive. About 6 months ago, I received another promotion, one that came with a significant raise. This wasn't just a validation of my hard work, but also a reminder of how far I've come since the days when Austin's antics nearly derailed me. Without his constant interference, I've been able to focus fully on my goals, and it's paid off. As for Austin, his life has taken a different trajectory. He's still jobless and living with my parents, who are finally starting to see the reality of the situation. From what I've heard, they've stopped giving him money. My dad even told him he needs to contribute to household expenses if he wants to stay there. It's been a long time coming, but it seems like my parents are finally setting boundaries with him. The extended family dynamic has shifted too. Over time, more relatives have come to understand Austin's pattern of manipulation and lies. A few even reached out to me, apologizing for siding with him during the initial fallout. Some family members have started distancing themselves from him altogether, which has only fueled his frustration. Austin's frustration came to a head a couple of months ago when he pulled what I now consider his final stunt. I was hosting a small family gathering at my place, nothing major, just a chance to connect with the relatives who've been supportive. Somehow, Austin got wind of the event and decided to show up uninvited. He arrived at the door, acting as though nothing had happened and expecting to be let in. I didn't hesitate. I calmly told him he wasn't welcome and closed the door. He didn't cause a scene, but from what I heard later, he complained to anyone who would listen about how cruel I'd been. Not long after that, Austin had a bit of a public meltdown. He posted a cryptic rant on social media, something along the lines of, "It's always the ones closest to you who hurt you the most." Some people have no loyalty. This time, though, no one took the bait. Most people ignored it, and a few even called him out, saying he needed to take responsibility for his own life. Shortly after, Austin deactivated all his accounts. As far as I know, he's faded from everyone's radar. The biggest surprise came from my dad. About a month ago, he called me out of the blue to apologize. He admitted that he and my mom had enabled Austin for years and said he regretted not stepping in sooner. While it doesn't undo the years of frustration and hurt, it was a step forward. I didn't expect it, but I appreciated the gesture. Reflecting on everything now, I don't regret my decision to go NC. I don't miss the chaos or the constant stress Austin brought into my life. What I do feel is a sense of relief and freedom. Without him in the picture, I've been able to focus on things that truly matter. One of the most rewarding changes has been finding ways to give back. I've started volunteering at a local community center, mentoring young adults who are navigating difficult family situations. Helping others has brought a kind of joy that I didn't know I was missing. I shared this final update on Reddit, and the response was overwhelming. People celebrated the progress I've made and shared their own experiences of cutting ties with toxic family members. The support has been incredible, and it's a reminder that so many of us go through similar struggles. Austin's absence from social media and the family spotlight seems to suggest that he's run out of options. I don't know what he's up to now, and honestly, I don't want to know. He's no longer my responsibility, and that's a boundary I intend to keep. As for me, the future looks bright. My career is thriving, my relationships with supportive family and friends are stronger than ever, and I've finally created a life that feels like my own. Austin's shadow no longer looms over me, and I couldn't be more grateful for that.